All right, so it's 4:30, I call the meeting to order. The public is able to attend the meeting in person here in this room. The meeting is also streamed on the library's YouTube channel, and the recording is made available after the meeting on the City of Rochester's website. Community members are always invited to address the board during this time. Is there any member of the public who is here and would like to speak? No. Okay. Roll call. Craig.
Here.
Steve. Here. Laurel.
Present.
Teresa.
Present.
Adam.
Here.
Nick is here. Karen's. The agenda, can I have a motion to approve the order of agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Updates and reports, first from the Public Library Foundation.
So Brenda is absent this evening, so, what was that?
She's still in training, right?
Yeah, she's participating in the Ready to Lead training, but does not have a report. Their board meets next Monday, I believe. But thanks to folks for National Library Week support. I know she extends that, but there will be a complete report next month.
Okay, thank you. Friends.
Val Kalashewski, president of the Friends, and as of yesterday at about 2 p.m., we were completely moved upstairs. Well, actually, as of 10:30 a.m., we were completely out of that room and we were upstairs. And by about 2:30, it was functional up there. We appreciate to Karen that we got that large space and that we didn't go into a much smaller space. It's laid out quite well, I think. A little biased because I may plan the layout, but I think it's going to work quite well. We're going to gain some efficiencies of having everybody be on the same level. Some people would prefer we kept it the old way, but everybody will be fine. Also, for first quarter of 2024, the online sales, this is where we review and see how much books might be valued online, $30 or more, and they get posted online. That doesn't mean they sell, but those that did get posted, that did sell, for the first 3 months of the year, online sales made $7,377. That includes things that are sold to online book wholesalers, which when those are sent off, we know we're getting the money. It's the things that are posted on eBay and Amazon that there's no guarantee it's going to sell. And in the document that was included in the packet, there's a link to go to our eBay for Charity webpage where you can see what the different items are that we do have for sale. And then also our scholarship application is open. In 2019, we started a $1,000 scholarship program to recognize current library staff and support their post-secondary educational pursuits. Applications are open through the end of April, and then library administration selects a worthy recipient, and I think it's in probably June that will be, May or June, that will announce who that recipient is. And that's all I have for today. Any questions for friends?
Okay.
You have a question?
Yeah, could you just update us when you tell us about the new scholarship winner, how the previous scholarship winner did?
Yeah, I'll have to check with Jacob. He's supposed to be, Jacob, I can't remember his last name off the top of my head. He was going to be graduating this year from the program that he was in, so I'll have to check with him. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Silk Hold.
Yes. So, on February 25th, the Selco Advocacy Committee members, staff, and others went to the Capitol to drop off packets of information about libraries where they had some impromptu meetings with legislators. Throughout the following week, there were Zoom meetings with 16 legislators. Bills that are going before the legislature include a couple of versions of a book banning bill, a bill that would allow a regional library system to hire a director without a master's degree in library science. The Minnesota Library Association, Selco Director Krista Ross, and many of the other regional library system directors are not in favor of either of those bills. There's a bill allowing local libraries to ban guns on their premises, and also a licensed media specialist bill, as well as the governor's bonding bill that includes $20 million for library construction. Also, Selco has a new staff person, Carol Jackson, the Director of Outreach and Instruction, and there are also plans to hire a user experience person in July. That is my report.
Any questions?
All right, thank you.
Can I ask a quick question about book banning?
Yeah.
Because, you know, there's all the information about there, it's happening, it's happening, it's happening. But are we getting those reconsideration requests really? Or is it just happening in social media and not actually filtering down to the world?
We hear that, and they would be coming to you if they would be moving forward in the process, and I would say we have not, there's not been any, that has even been brought to me in a number of months. And typically, when, you know, they start with the selectors, and then there's response, and then they'll come to me, and then if folks still want to move forward, then they'll bring it to the board, but we haven't had one brought to the board, I want to say ever, in since you've been here maybe.
Yeah,
One
it's
time?
it's not gone to the boards in the last 25 years.
Okay.
I think probably the most dramatic attempt to censor materials happened last summer with the Hide the Pride efforts, which I believe we kept you informed
Right.
about. Yeah, the numbers across the country have dramatically increased. There's lists that go around. It's not even like individuals anymore coming and saying, oh, I can't believe I found this. It's coordinated efforts, but so far, we're not,
Well, and that's.
we haven't been
but-
targeted.
And I only asked because, like, one of my students, for instance, brought that up, and then I said, okay, where are the actual information? And when she went actually out to ALA was able to talk about lots of stuff in social media, but wasn't able to give us real good numbers about actual, real challenges that went through the process, as opposed to going to Facebook and say, I hate Craig's book.
Oh, no,
You know.
Osseo Public Library had 10 challenges just this fall.
You were closer.
Yeah. I mean,
You know,
it has been an
that's
issue
one-
for the formal process. And what it's done is it's caused a lot of, like they'll have 10 requests that come all at once, and there's a lot of effort that goes into responding to those and researching those. And it makes it really difficult to do your job when you're spending a lot of time responding to challenges. And we have seen an uptick in Minnesota. And more at the school level so far than at the public.
Well, the
But I
kind of
think you're right,
expected.
I mean, if books getting banned, that does
Right,
not
it's
happen.
not really
They go through
happening.
the process
There's-
and boards are committed to the, you know, to intellectual freedom and maintain those in their collections. But
Right,
they
I just saw
definitely-
something about somebody in Texas who got fired because she wouldn't remove a book or something like that.
And that absolutely has been happening.
That's
in libraries.
Texas.
And
Well,
Florida,
again,
people
you
go
never
to
know, is,
jail.
okay, so did it go to the board, and then the board said remove it, and she didn't, so I said, okay, well, that's not a selection issue, that's insubordination, right? If you don't like that, change the board. From a you know, but I'm just trying to figure out what the actual lay of the land is here, as opposed to, you know.
I will say that we are incredibly fortunate that we have a board that is committed to intellectual freedom and to protecting that access to materials and to information. And not every community is as fortunate as we are. So.
Except for Craig's book, I just want that on the record.
Brand might not.
No, I looked at the cover and I didn't like it.
Just a metaphor.
be very clear about it.
Is there
Sorry.
anything else, any other?
Thank you.
Any other issues? Okay. Planning committee, that's me. Well, we kind of just touched on the pretty much completed RFP. Asked if there were any other potential changes, questions. We talked more about the pre-bid meeting that will happen once we release, assuming the board approves the RFP. And that RFP would go out tomorrow, right? Okay, tomorrow. Also, we talked about the group, the presentation of the library in relationship to the RFP, which will be on, oh, I had it here. What day is it?
Which we had on March 25th.
March 20th, okay. And how we should do that, if we should make it a recording that would be available whenever, and we decided no, that would not be the case, that there will be a specific meeting date that will be mandatory for those companies that are interested in participating.
And my apologies, the date on that is April 29th. It's coming up. I was confusing the presentation that we did before city council with the
Oh, here it is.
pre-bid meeting.
Yeah, it's April 18th. The library pre-bid meeting will be April 29th.
Yeah.
So that's about 11 days later. And I was,
10 a.m.
and I was just talking to Karen before the meeting about how this will go nationwide and how we can be assured of that we're hitting a number of companies so that we get good bids. And she
Yeah.
seems pretty confident.
We do have, both Jeremiah and Kim have been working on emails to the firms that we have researched. Thanks to our reference staff, collected a great list of firms based on some of the RFP examples that we had seen and the facilities and operations master plans examples from other libraries that we had seen. Developed a really great list, as well as a clearinghouse for this type of work that is a national clearinghouse. Jeremiah has a press release ready to go, and we'll be ready to send that out should the RFP be approved.
And we also talked about an interview committee once we get bids. And Steve and I are on that committee. There's library staff Jeremiah and
Kim, and
Kim,
then
okay.
Zach Wood from City Facilities.
yeah, so that's fine. Okay, I think that was it.
I've got a question about
Sure.
that, and forgive me because I should know this, but the potential $240,000 that this could cost, where's that funding coming from?
Half of it is from the city council, and half of it is from, exactly.
Yeah, it wasn't going to be library reserves, but the library foundation had set aside some money in case we were able to get a mobile outreach vehicle. And so that $40,000 was set aside, but that request in the budget didn't move forward with city priorities. So that $40,000 is instead gonna be, instead of some of the library reserves being used, it'll be a split between library reserves, foundation dollars, and then city, additional funding that was allocated to the library from city council in the 2024 budget.
Which kind of explains why they were so, firm, I don't know how to characterize that, direct, with their questions about it when you presented it.
Sure,
Yeah,
sure.
which it had already been approved.
Yeah, they weren't paying attention.
Yeah.
And you did a very
I
nice
think
job.
in the big grand
They
scheme
have
of
such
running
a
a
large,
city,
yeah.
and I'm sure in running a county, sometimes there are, you forget about
It had-
perhaps
it had
making those
already been
decisions.
approved.
It
Yes.
had
Yeah.
already been
Yeah.
approved.
It
Yeah.
had
That's why
already
it
been
was,
approved. You couldn't really read that from
No.
all the
and
questions.
they were not aware of that.
Yeah,
clearly.
they forgot
Are
that
you
it-
sure it needs to be that much money?
They
And
forgot.
you did a very good job of just not saying, please read the minutes from your previous meeting.
Yeah.
But in the end, it seemed like the consensus was support.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
And there's plenty more to talk about, there just wasn't enough time, and it wasn't really the time or place yet. to talk about more. I mean, it's, to me, it's, you know, the statistics that we show are important, indeed they are, but I don't want us to miss out on the whole idea of what is the experience that these people take away from here when they come in here. I mean, if the city is concerned about the impact of the library on the city's reputation, it's that experience that walks out the door and accumulates over, you know, time and so forth. That's very important, and I think we need to, you know, shine a better spotlight on that. So, but we will. Any other questions? Okay, let's see, executive committee update, we met, when was that? That was,
April 5th.
right, okay.
I had to look at things.
Yeah. There wasn't too much that was out of the usual. It's mainly to discuss what we're going to have in our agendas, both for April and May. The Jedi audit was talked about, but other than that, we talked about the finance, the planning, the Selco, and so forth. Oh, yes, we also talked about board responsibilities and the opportunity for board members, if they so wish, to become more involved with more of the strategic angle of library functioning versus the operation, which is mainly staff. And we will talk about that. I think Karen will talk about that pretty soon, later in the agenda. So we did talk about that. We talked a little bit about the library marketing plan, committee reports. I think that was it. Yeah, nothing earth shattering. Any questions? Okay. Let's see, finance committee update.
I can take that one.
Okay.
The Finance Committee met on April 8th. Not a whole lot to discuss because we are in the second year of a 2-year budget cycle, but 3 basic topics of conversation. The first being, one thing the city is considering adding this year of the budget cycle is that safety and security specialist position. All indications seem to be that they are going to approve. No indications otherwise yet. Shrug, we will see. The second being, in terms of the budget, the expenditures last year for part-time staffing were over budget and are ahead of budget for this year. I believe it's mostly because the transition to using the citywide wage group for part-time employees. So obviously something the staff is aware of. The team has a plan for dealing with those overages, mostly through attrition and the use of library reserves. So that seems to be under control. And then third, obviously the ongoing challenge of materials expenditures, especially as there's increasing demand for digital materials. Not a whole lot to do about that in year 2 of a 2-year budget, but obviously something to keep an eye on, especially as we enter the next full budget cycle.
Any questions? All right, thank you. Number 6, consent agenda for items 6A through 6D. Can I have a motion to approve those items?
So moved?
Is there a second?
Second.
We moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Number 7, library study RFP. Want to take that for a while?
Yeah, so in your packet was the final draft of the RFP for you to review. If there are any questions or comments, I think we caught every last little tiny typo. We incorporated the input from the planning committee meeting, and I think we're in a really good position to be ready to send this out.
And we have had this on the board agenda at least the last 2 meetings.
Yes.
maybe 3.
Feedback or questions, or?
Okay, can I have a motion to approve the library study RFP?
So moved.
there a second?
I'll second it.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you. Informational items, number 8, the Jedi audit.
Yes, so we have guests in our meeting with us today. So Laura and Amanda, I'll have you introduce and tell a little bit more about yourselves, and then do just kind of that high-level overview of the audit and speak a little bit about the process, and then we can have 4 questions to you, so.
Yeah, that sounds great. And we don't have too much, but want to just give you all an overview both of the process that we went through with your library, and then also how we got to that place and the bigger picture of what's going on in the city, if that's helpful context for people. But for those of you that don't know me, I know many familiar faces in the room, so that's awesome. But I'm Laura Ebeler, I use she and they pronouns. I'm a consultant with Good Enough Consulting. We do community education and policy work, and
Hi, I'm Amanda Florence Garcia Good Enough. I use she and her pronouns.
So first of all, just want to say thank you for making time for us as a part of your busy agenda. We really appreciate that. Also want to just express my personal support for libraries as the original community centers, and hoping that you all feel supported in this community doing the work that you're doing, because it's essential to the work that we're doing. And libraries are such a key component to making sure that people have access to the things that they need, the information that they deserve to have access to, and so just really appreciate the work you're doing, first and foremost. Just briefly about our background and where we came from. We have backgrounds in higher education, legislative research, and working in youth programming, and so that's a little bit of what we've done. Harm repair systems development for organizations, and this component, this JEDI audit, is a component of what we've done for organizations on a larger scale, something called a transformative equity analysis that includes several components to address and measure and understand a culture and climate of a space, and then offer suggestions and recommendations for improving inclusivity and access in those spaces. And so this is one component, I would say a mini version of what we do on a larger scale, but so wanted to give you all a little bit of context as to how this came to the library. So on a larger scale, at the city level, there is a partnership between Good Enough Consulting and the city that was initiated by your wonderful Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Director, Chow Motala. And the components of that being, it started with 6 sessions of Cultural Humility, which was a series that happened now like 2 years ago, it probably started. And the audience for that was departmental leaders. The second session incorporated a greater variety of levels of your city hierarchy and departmental hierarchies, broader participant pool there, and then the third series is starting next month, and so that was kind of one focus area for that partnership. The second focus area were policy and culture climate support through these mini audits that again were offered through that department, and different departments could elect to participate, so really grateful that the library chose to participate in one of the first rounds. Our first round was with HR, and then the 2 entities that we're supporting now are the library and the Parks and Recreation Department. And departments kind of have, freedom to say what they want support with. We like to be responsive to what the needs are, based on every different departmental entity having its own unique set of needs, and so the areas of focus for this mini audit, which the hours and scope of what we're able to support with has ranged from like 20 to 40 hours, also to contextualize that. And so the library wanted to focus on an environmental scan, again broad with the context of those hours, less than a work week for some of us. And then also looking at hiring and retention work, and so those are areas that we've supported folks with in the past, and so we were excited to do so. And so wanted to just, there is a third component as well that I'm gonna speak to in a moment, but just wanted to also share a little bit about context and scope of that. And then wanted to talk about kind of the way that we do our work and some of the things that we oftentimes see in organizations, and one of the reasons why I appreciate the library electing to go you know, in one of the first rounds of this type of work, is that oftentimes we're focusing on increasing levels of representation and like some of that numerical data that we want to see, like greater representation. We want to be reflective of the community in terms of, you know, race, gender, disability, and some of these social identities, but without building an intensely curated and cultivated sustainable culture of inclusion as a foundation, we're not going to be able to retain those people. So then we'll be bringing people in without having done any of the cultural work internally. And so as you read through the report, not assuming that everyone's gotten a chance to read it again, you have that, I believe, in full. So if you feel like you want to read through that and want to connect with us, I have also asked that Karen share both of our emails with you all, because we're happy to meet and answer any questions, or if anyone has follow-up or wants to process through anything, let us know. But because of the kind of two-part focus areas that we went with, we wanted to provide and with the limited scope of what we were working with, wanted to give as many broadly applicable suggestions and recommendations as possible so that they could be implemented in different areas and tailored in different ways to the different departments within the library itself. And so I'm not gonna like read through, I know that you all can read the full report if you would like to, but was just gonna go through some of those areas and then touch on what the next step is, which one of the things that we both, again, appreciate in this work is making sure that voices throughout all levels of an organization are incorporated into these processes, because oftentimes folks like at the lowest levels of our predetermined hierarchies know so much that those of us at the top of an organization just might not know by the nature of our day-to-day jobs, not interacting in the same ways, in the same spaces, with the same people. And so really wanting to tap into that wisdom was something I also really appreciated being part of the process, and that's a next step. And so that information, again, will be something additional to this, and also help specify some of the recommendations that are in this report with the voices of all the people within the library. It's going to be a lot more detail able to be applied to some of the recommendations here. Some of the hiring process content that you'll see as you read through some of our recommendations, we like to go holistically from like recruitment and job postings, recommend some places that oftentimes organizations might not even know about. Sometimes in marginalized communities, like our way of sharing information is by word of mouth, and so like making sure that those connections are made, and maybe we're posting to places that aren't necessarily traditionally utilized or even known to exist by like the recruiting side of hiring, and so you'll see some of that. You'll also see some things about like how stay interviews can be supportive, ways to improve interview questions to incorporate some of the values that the library has like woven within questions that may already exist, but like adding a layer to that. Some accessibility options to incorporate, because again, our philosophy is kind of to go above and beyond compliance. So we know ADA, you know, has some compliance factors, but we always like to, as much as we can, you know, as much as is possible within the capacity of these spaces, to be going above and beyond and not waiting for someone to ask for things that they may need, and just making the process more accessible on the front end when possible. You'll also see some suggestions for retention, exit processes, because sometimes that's an area that we forget to ask some questions that are gonna give us important information, especially as we're diversifying, like how can we be retaining people, and giving people outlets for feedback that allow for anonymity if power dynamics or risk of retaliation is a consideration. And again, that's just something that's inherent to all organizations that operate within a hierarchy. So just trying to dispel some of those barriers as best we can. And then in the environmental scan, there's some other components related to communications and transparency, and you all do such a great job of communicating your values. So how can we be doing that more, or sharing, because I think often in these spaces, and I'll stop talking soon, I promise, people look to a library as a leader in this work, and so to be clear about what you all are doing and what you're working towards even, I think is a really powerful statement to people who often look to these spaces as their safe place, as the place they go to when they want to feel supported. And so I think sharing the progress and a timeline of your efforts is also something helpful. So you'll see some examples of how other entities have done that. Just recommendations about harm reduction, addressing poverty, some ideas of programming and initiatives that you could consider. Our environmental scan was, again, pretty compounded, and so some of the things might exist in different ways or just look differently. But again, get creative and incorporate them in whatever ways. Religious inclusivity, some things like that. And then in terms of next steps, there will be a survey, and so some of my internet connection just dropped, 1 second. Just wanted to share a little bit about what that survey looks like, but essentially it's a breakdown in conjunction with the format of the report for clarity and simplicity, but then hopefully linking the report so all staff can read it if they want. Again, I know it's kind of a lengthy document, so I don't know if people will, but then they can easily go to the sections where we're asking questions. But so it'll be asking for item by item feedback from staff if they have, just to share their experiences, their suggestions, things that they liked about the hiring and retention and onboarding and all these different components, so that you all can have that information to be able to keep the things that are working well, improve on the things that need to be improved on, and then you're tapping into the wisdom that already exists and not having to like go externally, because there's probably so much that's going to come from that. I'm super excited that that's part of the process, and hoping that people want to engage in it, and then we'll obviously give those results back to you all, and in an anonymized way if people are sharing their stories. But sometimes it can elicit more authentic and transparent feedback when you have a partnering agency doing that, than if someone's coming to you and asking for feedback. Sometimes we don't want to give feedback to people directly for a variety of reasons, but oftentimes one is like, I don't want to hurt their feelings, or things like that. So just alleviate some of those inherent barriers, especially being in the Midwest and in a very conflict-averse space. We find that this is a helpful way for people to be able to deliver feedback. So hopefully that gives you an overview. Again, if you could share our contact information, we're happy to talk one-on-one or two-on-one about any of this. So, but very much appreciate your time and the library's initiative to be a part of one of the first mini audits. So thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions, comments? I was thinking, in your experience, has it been productive at all to reach out to community groups to try to get their opinions about the library? And for example, a group that has minority focus on it. Has that ever generated useful perspectives? I mean, that it really does indeed reflect, or seems to reflect, the sentiments or the visions or the perspectives of that particular group, whatever it is.
Absolutely. I think having a robust community engagement strategy for updating policies and practices is always essential. Like, I think that one of the things, now that I'm thinking of like the way, because we're not doing our full organizational like climate and culture process that we've done with other spaces, and so it is hard because it's this one component of a larger possible process, but something to consider when you all are continuing this work and building on some of the things that you're doing. But I would say immensely helpful.
What would be the best approach, like focus group or?
You could, I think, like finding the people that exist within your space that have strong relationships with those groups, because I think another barrier too, and again, like we could go off on a tangent about the struggles for community engagement, especially in rapidly diversified communities where like sometimes if there's not trust built, first of all, then it takes a long time to build that trust sometimes, especially when government entities are involved for a variety of historical reasons. But building on existing relationships, which I'm guessing library staff have, because you all are a space where people just come often from our most marginalized community groups, tapping into those relationships that already exist, not trying to have it be people in those spaces leading those discussions based on title.
Hopefully we'll get more into that when we award the RFP.
Well, yeah. Yeah, and then I heard that that's awesome. And so hopefully some of what we had shared can weave into some of that, or at least bolster like some of what you all are planning to do with that. So I think it's a great timing for you all.
The other thing that jumped off to me is the all-gender bathroom. I thought that was a good idea, but I don't know where in this library we can find a place. I mean, it's just, we're so squeezed, or what's the word? You know, I mean, it's a great idea, and
Yeah, and-
I wish we could do it, but, you know, it's a bathroom, but it sends a message as well. You know, so that's out there, but I don't know how we could do it right now.
Well, and
And
some of the ways that we like wanted to just also like, and this is something I didn't mention at the forefront, but always like to, is like, we like to give ideas that might be in more of the imaginative realm. It might be a long-term goal, but at least you have it now to have that be a goal for when you might somehow access, you know, the funding that you all already deserve, but probably aren't getting, to make your space, you know, what your patrons and the community need it to be. So totally understand that everything's not doable in the moment. That's never something that we have as an expectation, but just as something to think about in the future for sure, because that does send a huge message. It's something that I look for when I come into a space.
Karen,
for
you
sure.
wanted to say something?
Well, one thing that, I mean, when we do head into the RFP process, I would be very shocked if that was not something that came out of some of the research of analyzing our existing structure and facility, because it has been a challenge, and it's been something that we've noticed as a need, but not an unfunded need. And going back to the community engagement piece, when we went through our building of the current strategic plan, which is I know our next topic, we did partner at the time with the Diversity Council to lead a series of focus groups with underrepresented, marginalized groups, which very much informed our current strategic plan. And I would imagine when we get to that point within next year sometime, also doing a similar process or incorporating again more of that community listening, because it is essential. Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? All right, well, thank you for coming.
Yeah, thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Number 8, board strategy and library operations. This kind of evolved from an expression by some board members to see if there was opportunities beyond simply these meetings here, and maybe the subcommittees that you may be on, to contribute to the library given your backgrounds. And you've all got just a copy of the library board compact. It's kind of a reminder of things that we kind of obligate ourselves to. And we did discuss this at our executive committee meeting. And we brought up the distinction between operational and strategic. And it seems like the strategic goal aspect or dimension would be the one in which we could provide opportunities for board members to get more involved.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, thank you for that feedback of, wanting to be even more involved, and especially in that strategy setting place. I think of our board members as our, the community representatives that are bringing forward that input on how our strategy is meeting community needs. So for library board responsibilities in this space, they're really defined by our bylaws, and then we also spell them out in the board compact and also in our roles and responsibilities. So those are all foundational board documents that we that has been crafted historically, and in the bylaws specifically under Article 2, the purpose section really defines the role of the board and kind of the list of the things that the board is responsible for. Our bylaws were last reviewed in 2017, and they will be one of the first things that our policy committee folks will get to take a look at and review this year. So here is that list of the different areas that the board has that responsibility for, of course. You know, my role and overseeing my role, which we advocated for maintaining back when there was an attempt to change the charter. Authorizing any request for staff, so if we ever want to ask council for a staff member, we come here first. We did that when we smooshed together part-time hours to create a full-time position. You know, it was approved here at the board before taking it to council. And then other budget related items, seeking funding and advocating for funding, and then providing that oversight for how operations are handled and developing our long-term strategies, and then that overall advocacy piece. The board compact is something that again was reviewed in 2017, and this is based off of another library that, or library system that had a similar compact. There are many libraries that have these, that try and really speak to the board acting as a board, not as individuals, but making sure that, for example, when complaints come to individuals, then they do get referred to me, and then if there is a board collective position, that is communicated collectively to me as direction, but complaints, ideas for programs, those things can come to me and we can talk about those operationally with our teammates. The roles and responsibilities is another document. This one is more of an internal procedural document that kind of breaks down how we are in relation to what Friends and Foundation is responsible for, what our team is responsible for operationally, and what the board is responsible for. And this will need some updating as well. I've updated to remove anything that was, you know, very old, but I know we're in the process currently, for example, looking at developing MOUs with Friends and also with Foundation. Again, setting things on paper. What is that phrase, you know? Good fences make good neighbors. What was yours?
Memorializing.
And memorializing, yeah, and codifying really what our relationship is so that we are very well clearly communicating what our different lanes are. So the board activities, what those look like in action, obviously, is my annual review, those requests for positions that come, when we do the priorities, when the finance committee recommends priorities, and then we're taking those as we, you know, do any kind of supplemental budget requests. That's where the board's role is. And then on that next slide, some other examples. The board does provide the oversight for our policies, and really also anything operationally that has strategic significance, and I know that can vary depending on boards. But for an example, we wouldn't necessarily come forward with changing our story time hours from 10:30 to 11, but we would come forward with a proposal to change our library hours. That is strategically significant and has potential financial impact. So the board also does some resolutions, and those have been particularly meaningful. And we have appreciated, again, reiterating that protection of being able to access information and supporting the freedom to read. And then also last year, there were board members that did advocate for keeping the charter the way that it is and maintaining that governing piece and that governing role of the library board. A lot of the work comes through committees. And I will say that in my first year and in my second year in this role, I was slow to bring up our committees. We had come through the pandemic where I think the committee meetings went down to very few and far between because who knew what anyone was really doing. I mean, it was a very different time. So policy committee was one of those committees. where we did not meet, we did not do a lot of review of the policies, and that is one that we'll be meeting sooner rather than later. And we have a first set of list of policies to review, including the bylaws, the compact, and some other policies that we'll be bringing forward. This is the full list of the policies that we're going to review in the coming months for board to give input. This is a great space where it's, I guess, an obvious space for that board involvement is the management of those policies and putting in that input on the policies about how we operate, again, in that strategic space. And speaking of our strategy, the board is very involved in developing our strategic plan, which we then turn into our internal action plans and our operations. We did do an extensive strategic planning process in 2019, and this yielded this plan that the plan was adopted in January of 2020, and then I think that, there were definitely the different thoughts and expectations when this plan was adopted. And then, of course, we had pandemic times that kind of interrupted, but we are now back onto that visioning and forward thinking and making sure that we're, meeting the strategic priorities that were identified as we went through that process. But we haven't been doing something that we did pre-pandemic, and that's really bringing forward these kind of strategic updates in a very kind of clear and consistent way. So pre-pandemic, we were going through each of our strategic initiatives, and I would like to bring that back. We brought that back in some ways topically, but we haven't brought it back in a very consistent way that we would like to bring back. So looking to add that to the agenda. I think those provide the best opportunities for board engagement that really is in a strategic lane versus an operations lane. So, as always, I do welcome feedback and welcome questions and try to admit when I am wrong, and I had a perfect example with Steve and Nick recently. So if there are things that you feel that need to be brought and added to the agenda, there is a way to get items and topics added to the agenda. But there's also opportunities for feedback to me individually as well. So what are some other ways that you would like to see board engagement and connection to some of our strategies that we are working to implement? Or you can sit and think about it.
And Karen has a pretty open door policy.
Yes.
If you come up with some idea, please consult with her at any point, right?
Yeah, or have questions about anything. Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, we do.
That's it. Questions and answers about anything that we've gone over. Okay, if not, can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved?
Is there a second?
Sure.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We're adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.